Well, hello. Welcome to a course in mind training. Isn't that exciting? No, really. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, this is a course in mind training. It's a course in miracles. 365, Awakening to Love. Yes. Thank you for joining me. So where we are is we're in part one here, chapter one of the text, part seven, the distortions of miracle impulses. And today we're looking at paragraphs 3 through 5. It's true, there was so much information in the last video in the first two paragraphs that warranted a 22-minute discussion all on its own. And in fact, I could have gone on and on for 4 or 5 hours because there's so much we can say. So today, paragraphs 3 through 5, and what we'll be looking at is fantasy and mind training. Yeah, fantasy and mind training. Isn't that interesting? That sounds great as a standalone title, doesn't it? But we're looking at distortions of miracle impulses. And just to recap, the very fact that we have miracle impulses is amazing and beautiful. And it's testament to our own reality as one with God. The very fact that deep down we want to do the will of God, in other words, extend love. The fact that we deep down want to do that is amazing, and it is cause for joyous celebration. It is. This is ourselves listening to our inner voice, our inner teacher, with whom we're invited to get into close contact and relationship here in this course. It's the voice, which of course doesn't have to come across as an audible collection of sounds. It can be a feeling, it can be an intuitive hit, it can be just a deep inner knowing, and it can be something that someone else says. It can be what I'm saying right now or anyone else, right? Something that just reminds you of something. Reminds you of what? Of who you really are, of thinking that amidst all of the chaos in our world today, that there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a different way of seeing this. Oh, and there definitely is. So let's all take heart in that. That's exciting. Right. Fantasy first. Yeah. Paragraph 3. There used to be a television show on in the United States in the 1970s, in the latter part of the 1970s, called Fantasy Island. Does anybody remember that? And we think of fantasy in all kinds of different ways as an escape, as escapism. There's a whole fantasy genre in literature, including The Lord of the Rings and a lot of other titles, Right? There is just a collection of fantasy. So what is fantasy? Well, it's not reality. There are many ways to define it. That's one of them. Fantasy is not reality. So let's talk about fantasy from the standpoint of mind and mind training, and specifically A Course in Miracles. The fantasy is, as you might guess, a distortion of miracle impulses. Why? Well, it's an attempt to make real something that's not real. Here's how it works. Let's use politics as an example. I often use politics as an example, not to espouse one system or another. You'll never get that out of me. But to demonstrate the ego at play, to demonstrate in a very obvious and pervasive way how people define and defend personal territory. It's the ego running amok, governing the entire show, and we're letting it. So, fantasy. Indulging in fantasy is indulging in our own mind in thoughts that aren't real, in thinking that somebody or a collection of people stand as our opponent. We make an opponent out of them. Why? Because they've put together a different platform of beliefs, a different series of statements, or they seem to be comprised of a different group of people. They look differently than you. They think differently. They live in different neighborhoods than you. Right? These are all divisions. They're all separations. Not one of them is true. The truth is perfect oneness. So not one of them is true. And we label these people and indulge in all kinds of untrue thoughts about them, labeling them dangerous, labeling them wrong. And we imagine they're wreaking all kinds of havoc should they ascend to this mythical and equally illusory thing we call power. Power over whom? Fantasy involves our thinking that these people are one way, we're a different way. So what's the problem with that? Well, only we believe what we're making here. We're making this other person out to be wrong, this other group of people out to be wrong and tyrannous or dangerous or whatever adjective. We're making them out to be wrong, but do they believe they're wrong? No, not at all. If I'm making them out to be wrong in my own mind, only I believe that. They don't believe that. It's not communication. It doesn't flow both ways. Each side believes it is 100% correct and has obtained the right to do as they will. And if somebody gets in their way, step on them. There are many other ways, more forceful ways, of course, to put that, aren't there? One of them in the English language is a four-letter word that starts with the word F. If they get in our way, they should have moved. We indulge in all kinds of thoughts like this. That's fantasy. It's making something out to be something other than it is. Now, contrast that with the miracle, which benefits both the giver and the receiver. When you forgive, when you extend love to, let's say, the opposite political party or your neighbor who has a slogan, a campaign slogan up in their yard that you don't agree with, and you know they're thinking certain thoughts, right? When you extend them love and forgiveness, you benefit as the forgiver. They also benefit. This is communicative because it's real. Love is real. Our essential oneness with God is real. So when you extend the miracle, the other person benefits as well as you do, especially the forgiver, you, because there's nobody out there. So how do they appear to benefit? Well, because they're not going to change their political affiliation just because you forgave them. And they're not. You can't expect that to happen, right? But understand that forgiveness is operating on the level of the mind. Here, the level of form, they can feel your peaceful energy, rather than your contempt. Now, they may expect your contempt. They may expect you to get into an argument with them because that's what they're used to people doing. That's what they would do, maybe. Who knows, right? But the very fact that you're bringing love and peace to the situation is something that's not going to be lost on them. They may run and hide from it. They may choose to deny it, but there is here in the world of form a tremendous impact from your forgiveness. Remember, we've said many times that the world needs you to show up and extend love. The world needs you to be at your level best that you're capable of at any given moment. The world needs you to go forward and forgive. The world needs your spiritual practice and your commitment to it, doesn't it? It, not the world, but your spiritual practice, of course. The miracle is very different. Fantasy is just a distortion of the miracle impulse. Now, paragraphs 4 and 5, mind training. People who dismiss spirituality in general often say, oh, that's just mind control. Don't they? Have you ever heard that? That's something that I have heard in my life quite a bit from people who dismissed what I do or what anyone on any spiritual path does as out there, as woo-woo, as ephemeral, not real. Because we can't see it with the body's eyes, therefore it doesn't exist. I mean, how many times have you had that dialogue with somebody where it was quite clear that they weren't ready to follow a spiritual path? No problem, right? Sometimes these people dismiss what we're doing as mind control. Well, it's a course in mind training. Who controls it? You control your own. Remember, it's an adult endeavor. We're responsible for our own decisions. We're responsible for the world we see. So we can choose to see it differently. And Jesus goes on here at the tail end of this section of the text to tell us that we need to focus on these fundamentals first. This course is done at the level of the mind. Forgiveness is done at the level of the mind. In other words, cause. The external world is the effect. And of course, it only appears external to us. It's not. It appears that way. That's the effect. This course doesn't concern the effect in any way. So let's come back to your neighbor who is of a different political ilk than you. It's not about getting them to change their voter registration, is it? It's not about getting them to make different choices in life. It's about you making a different choice. You making the choice to forgive, choosing love, in other words, choosing God, choosing the thought system of the Holy Spirit over the ego. It's about you making that choice. What we appear to see in the world outside may or may not show up the way we want it to. I mean, really. It's a course in cause and not effect. But as we've seen, there is a benefit on the level of form to your forgiveness. Do it and pay attention to how people respond to you. It's always interesting and fun too. Yeah, if you let it be. How do people respond to you when you are consciously loving and forgiving? And isn't that preferable to when you're not? All of this sounds obvious. I mean, it really does. We spend time on these basics and fundamentals because they're necessary for later on so that we don't freak out later on when we learn to communicate directly with God. It wouldn't be very kind or very nice to throw us into a situation that's just going to provoke fear, would it? Fear of what? Well, fear of who we really are. And people identifying with the ego are naturally afraid of losing it. They're afraid this thing's going to die. So, yes, this is a course in mind training. It's a self-study course, and one of the major components is actually called a workbook. The other's called a text, the one we're going through now. The other's a manual for teachers, manual, workbook, text. It's a self-study course, and it is a course in mind training. There are many courses in the world that concern themselves with the effects, with the apparently exterior world of compound phenomena that don't last. If you've studied Buddhism, you may be laughing at that right now. Yeah, compound phenomena. Well, there are a lot of phenomena out there. There are a lot of courses that are designed to produce change in the effect. There are courses designed to produce changes to this image that you see projected on your screen. There are health courses, there are business courses, there are even spiritual traditions that are quite concerned with the effect. This course is not. It's concerned with the cause, the projector, if you will. Not the image on the screen, the projected image. It's a different approach, isn't it? Now, this is not to say that this is the only approach. Far from it. Yeah, it's not. There are many doors to spirituality. And if you are among the people in the world, and there are so many, right, that are actively looking, number one, keep looking, right? If this material speaks to you, great. If it doesn't speak to you, great. It's no offense to me or to the Holy Spirit or anyone else. There are many doors. What I mean by that is there are many different approaches to spirituality. It may be a traditional religion, or it may be something else completely. It might be a combination of many different traditions. The beautiful thing is, if you're searching, keep searching. There's never been a better time than right now in the 21st century, when every single tradition that exists in the world is available. You can find out information about it, and you can get in touch with practitioners of any tradition in the world. So the question for you as a seeker then becomes, what is speaking to me? And this may speak to you greatly, and it may not. So what's most important, as always, is your commitment to practice, your willingness. We call it here in the course a little willingness, your willingness to listen to that inner voice that is urging you on, that's maybe whispering in your ear, maybe talking with some volume in your ear about there being a different way of looking at this. It's urging you to seek the peace of God. It's urging you to want the peace of God. And as you do, we discover on the path that you don't actually have to look for it. It is simply who we are. It's always been. Always. What we do is remove the blocks to our awareness of this. That's what we call the spiritual path. All right, guys. Yes. Fantasy and mind training. So thank you, as always, for tuning in here. Subscription button's right down here in the corner. That's the little red arrow. I'd love to have you, and I really thank you for all of your comments and questions. I welcome those because I would love for this to be as much of a discussion forum as possible. I'm here for any questions or comments. Here to be a guide. That's why I offer these videos. There's always something that I say that you need to hear, otherwise you wouldn't be watching. Correct? You'd be watching something else because God knows there's a lot of other things that you could be doing right now. So I thank you for tuning in here and for your dedication and commitment to your own practice. That's really, truly the most important thing of all. All right. So happy forgiving, guys, and I will see you very soon.